Hello and welcome back to another Hitfilm tutorial. Today I'm going to be showing you how you can keyframe, the different keyframe controls, and also the different types of keyframe. This is a beginner tutorial, so we'll be going over the basics, but I will be doing some more advanced motion graphics tutorials that will be using keyframing in the future. So as you can see here, I have a new project. This has nothing in it as I only just created it. I have saved it and renamed it because then I would be able to know what it was. You can keyframe inside of the editor, however I would quite like to show you how to keyframe it inside of a new composite shot. So I'm going to create one of them, and I'm just going to call this Keyframing Comp. I'm then just going to change the duration over to being 10 seconds and leave all of the other settings the same. Then I'm just going to press OK. Then inside of this new composite shot I need something to keyframe, so I'm going to create a new plane. You can keyframe anything from text layers, to lights, to points, to cameras, to planes, to effect settings, and all sorts of other things. So as you can see, I've got this new plane layer, and I'm just going to scale this down to make it more of a square. Then when I select this, you can see that we have a center point and some arrows and a rotation. If you drag around this center point, you can see that the square will follow your mouse until you let go of it. You can also use the green and red handles for the X and Y position of this plane layer. So the first thing I'm going to be showing you how to do is how to start keyframing. So to start keyframing, you want to select the layer you want to keyframe, then go up to the Controls tab, or you can expand the properties in the timeline, and then go into the transform settings, or wherever it is that the property you want to keyframe is. Then as you can see, next to these different controls for this layer, we've got these circles. And then if you click on one of these, so I'm just going to click on the circle next to position, you can see that it will change colour and it will create a keyframe on the timeline. This has basically saved the X and Y data for this layer, meaning that then when I move ahead in the timeline and move the plane once again, a new keyframe will be created there automatically. And then as I scrub through the timeline, you can see that the square will move from point A to point B that we created with the keyframes. While you're keyframing, any adjustments you make will be keyframed automatically. You don't have to press another button to set a keyframe if you've just moved it. You can keyframe other properties such as opacity, the anchor point, the position, the scale, the rotation, and also effect properties. So to demonstrate this, I'm just going to reset this plane layer, and I'm just going to drag some fractal noise onto this plane. I'm then going to open the properties for fractal noise, and as you can see, once again we have properties with circles next to them. If they have a circle next to them, this means that you can keyframe them. And if they only have a dot next to them, this means that you can't keyframe it. So if I started keyframing the seed and moved ahead in the timeline to 10 seconds and changed the seed property from 0 to 10, you will see that this fractal noise will now move over the course of the timeline. This will also happen for other properties and other effects. Going back to our previous example with this square that's just moving across the screen, you can see that on the timeline we have two keyframes that are diamond shapes, and they have a singular line through the middle. If you hover over this keyframe, you can see that your cursor will change from the standard mouse cursor over to an arrow. This means that when you click and drag, you can then move the keyframe across the timeline, and the closer together the keyframes are, the faster the object will move, and the further apart they are, the slower it will move. Something else which will determine the movement and the speed of the object would be using keyframes is what keyframe type you're using. The default when you start keyframing is linear. However, you can change it to constant, smooth, smooth in, smooth out, or manual Bezier. The standard constant keyframe will move the object from point A to point B without having any decrease in speed or acceleration, and will just continue going constantly. A constant keyframe will jump from point A to point B when the keyframe arrives. So as you can see here, keyframe A is up at this top corner, but then as we scrub through the timeline, it's staying at point A until it reaches keyframe B, and it jumps down to the bottom. Then we have smooth. Smooth will ease in and ease out on its own. So as you can see, it starts off a bit slower and then moves into the motion, then it will get faster during the middle, and then slow down towards the end. Smooth in will basically just do the starting animation for that, and smooth out will do the opposite, and do the smoothing out animation. And manual Bezier can be used for using in the value graph, which will give you more precise controls. There is a really good tutorial by FXhome that I will leave a link to in the description below, all about how to use the value graph for animations and keyframing. So the next thing that I'm going to be showing you is the different keyframe controls you have on the timeline. So if you go just above the timeline, you can see that we have these three buttons here, next to the different keyframe types. As you can see, we have previous keyframe, toggle keyframes, and next keyframe. If you were at the start of the timeline, your previous keyframe will be grayed out and you can't do it because there won't be anything before the start of the timeline. But if you move ahead and you have keyframes in your timeline and you have selected a property that has keyframes, like I have here, as you can see position is selected, so it's also selected the keyframes, you can see that we can jump around the keyframes using these buttons. However, if you're not selecting a layer that has keyframes, there won't be any controls for keyframes. You can also start keyframing from the toggle keyframe button if you are on a layer that doesn't have any. So if I wanted to start keyframing just here for opacity, but I couldn't be bothered to go down into the transform settings and click on the circle, I could just press on toggle keyframes, it will create a keyframe, and activate keyframing for this layer, and then I can move ahead and change the opacity. You can also use the toggle keyframe button to delete keyframes. I've used the next keyframe control to get onto the last keyframe on my timeline, and then if I press this toggle keyframe button, it will delete that keyframe, leaving us with only the first keyframe. I'm just going to undo that. And you can also use this to create keyframes where there wasn't already one. All of these keyframe controls and keyframe types can be used for other effects and properties such as mask, positions and shapes, and also different effects. I hope you found this tutorial helpful, and if you did, then please leave a like and subscribe. And if you have any questions, then please feel free to ask them in the comments below, and if you have any tutorial suggestions, then once again, leave them in the comments below. Hope you enjoyed. Goodbye.